You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the past holistic well being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together. And welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, and I'm joined by my sister, Tara O'Neill, clinical hypnotherapist, certified life coach, and yoga instructor. Hi, Tara.
Hello.
Today, we're absolutely thrilled to welcome Matthew Smith, founder and director of The Sanctuary in northern New Jersey. Matthew's journey is one of resilience, service, and creating spaces that foster connection, creativity, and holistic well-being. Through The Sanctuary, Matthew has built a community hub that offers everything from poetry and songwriters, circles of meditation, educational workshops, open mic nights, and his work really exemplifies the power of community in transforming lives. We're going to talk about his own inspiring recovery journey and how that fuels his passion for service and mental health advocacy. So today, we'll dive into Matthew's story, his vision for the sanctuary, and the vital role third spaces play in creating and building a vibrant community that is connected with those who live there. Matthew, without any further ado, welcome aboard.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here on a Saturday morning or whenever this airs.
Sure, absolutely, no problem at all.
But that's the kind
Yeah,
of
and
guy
we
Matthew.
always, absolutely. And, the podcast, podcasts obviously can be listened to by people near and far. And, the other day we had an interview and we were talking to somebody overseas, and we're talking about how, him and I were sharing a bit of a concern that, you try to do things and create kind of a tribe and grow a movement and a connected, you know, mission that people have, right? Like-minded people have. And it seems like sometimes you have to start from far away from people that are kind of spread out and that you may not have known throughout your life. But so it's great to have something local to kind of really, advertise for and kind of promote and discuss and, shine the light on. So we're definitely glad that you're doing what you're doing, as Tara would always say. So could you
Thank
tell
you.
listeners a little bit about, what the sanctuary is, what third spaces are, or maybe you want to take them back and tell them a little bit about how you got to where you are.
Yeah, of course. That's a whole lot. Just, from from where I started to how I got to this microphone here sitting with you all. I'll summarize it. I'm not special. I thought I was for a long time, but like my journey wasn't super special. A lot of people deal with very serious mental health issues and addictions, and I really thought I was alone in that for the longest time, but I'm not. So I guess that's what I meant by like not special. Like I really thought my case was very unique growing up. I was in and out of psychiatric and addiction hospitals starting from age 13 until I was 23, 22, 23. Yeah. And I in those years when I was still very severely mentally ill, mostly with depression and anxiety, and still addicted to drugs. Um, I was seeing a therapist that did have some benefit. I saw a bunch of different therapists. I did go to inpatient treatment a few times that had its benefit. I did take medications of various types that had some benefit. But I did find that nothing had more of a benefit than like just like a loving, supportive community. And especially like it did take away that like terminal uniqueness when I started going to like, for example, 12-step meetings and different types of support groups where there were other people who had similar experiences to mine. And I was like, wow, I'm not alone in this. Um, Mainly when I started going to 12-step meetings. And, that was just what I'd been searching for my whole life. Um, I never meant to get into like the self-help profession or not the professional helping, you know what I mean. I never meant to become a therapist, but I did. Um, I was a touring musician for a long time, and that just wasn't really suiting me anymore. Even though I love the arts, it was taking me away from like building community and planting roots, which I desperately needed for my recovery and for a happy life. That's just, for me. And, I started getting into the professional helping industry in various forms and eventually had the opportunities to go back to school. And I just started learning about, like, when I first was getting well, when I first really in 2016, like when I first really dived in, was like, okay, I'm going to die if I don't get some help. Like, I'm going to either take my own life or drugs are going to kill me. When I first was like, okay, I need to do something, I tried a lot of different things. And again, like the support groups are what helped me the most. And when I went back to school, I started learning the science behind that, like just why it's so important for us to have community. And eventually that led me to just starting to host events at my house so that I could feel more connected to a community. I was sort of done waiting for people to call me and ask me to hang out. So I started hosting game nights. I started hosting a campfire in my backyard, and that was really meaningful. I would have, like when you have like friends from different friend groups that don't know each other. I was
Yeah,
like,
sure.
well, I want to get everybody together in my backyard. And I was at that time, this is about 4 or 5 years ago, I was doing a lot of group facilitation at drug and alcohol rehabs. So I was like, I know I'm good at like bringing people together and having group conversations in a therapeutic sense. Maybe I could do that outside of the therapeutic world. Like other people who aren't in crisis also deserve the opportunity to come together and have meaningful conversation. This doesn't just need to be for people in crisis. So I started having that, and then the winter hit and we stopped. And then the next summer we did it again. And it just was so good that then when the winter hit, we bought a yurt, myself and some friends, and we built it in my backyard. And we just kept meeting like at least once a week, just an open, free invitation to anybody who just wants to come. And when we went in the yurt, it was by candlelight, obviously, instead of a campfire. Um, and then that just progressed. And then we eventually opened the sanctuary. And yeah, it was fueled by a lot of intuition and then also by a lot of science, like third spaces is a great term that's come around recently for those that don't know. Like essentially, we spend most of our time, our first space at our house, our second space at our job. But what about these third spaces where the community can meet? And I'm not against going to the bar, but that can't be the only thing, for adults to do is just go to the bar. Especially, there's not a lot of opportunities to be vulnerable there. So, and creative. So really just our goal at the sanctuary was just, can we create a very cheap, if not free at times, um, opportunity for people to come together to create, to have fun, to heal, to find various ways of connecting with each other. Um, and so, yeah, that's what we've been doing for the past few years now. I hope that wasn't too much.
No,
I
it's
just,
great. It's a
yeah,
great kind of baseline, a foundation to jump off of. I want to go back to something you said at the beginning where you had said you
yeah.
thought you were the only one. It wasn't until later on where you were able to find like-minded people that had the same experience. But what about in that time? What about your peer group or those around you in that time? Were they kind of contributing to your downward spiral, or were you hiding how things were going from them? The people that you were coming up with when you were in your teens and early 20s, did they not want to change, so you had to find another group? Did they not help you out, and how are they not able to help you to fill that communication and kind of where you could connect with them, and you guys could help each other move forward?
I'm glad you asked this question because I don't, in part, like, yes, it was the people I was hanging out with, but they are not the reason I became an addict. They are not the reason I had mental health problems. I think I gravitated towards the people, like attracts like. But I think it's more of a societal problem. We talk about recovery from mental illness and addictions, which I think are the same thing, by the way. We talk about those as like such an individualistic path, but we need to talk more about recovery on a social scale. Like, what has gone wrong with us as a society where young people or just people in general feel like nobody around them is experiencing the same pain and suffering that they are. I mean, look, I've been working in drug and alcohol and mental health rehabs now for 9 years. And like most of the people you see sitting in these chairs are just average people that you'd see walking past you on the sidewalk in Times Square. You wouldn't think anything is wrong with them at all. But you sit them all in chairs and put a prompt on the table and say, let's talk about this, and people start to open up. So I don't think it was necessarily that anyone was enabling me in my youth. I just think like our society has taught us that we don't talk about certain things. And it's not like we were living in tribes hundreds of years ago where we sit around the fire at the end of the night and say what's on our hearts and minds and our joys and our pains. And I don't think, again, like I was pushed into support groups and whatnot, and I'm glad I was because I needed it to save my life. But I think every human being, whether you're in crisis or not, needs a place to go or people to be around that they can just be vulnerable with and open up to. And that's not that easy in our society today. And that's why I think we need more places like the Sanctuary. And there's tons of places in New Jersey. There's Prototype, Flemington DIY, Madison Community Arts Center, all these great places that are like understanding this need that's not being met in our society and pushing for it to be met. And people like you as well, who I think understand the truth, that the best medicine we can give somebody who's struggling with a mood disorder or an addiction or many other illnesses is just love and support and community.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many good things that I want to ask you, and thank you for sharing all of this. Um,
Mm,
so, I mean, it's a very serious topic, but I'm excited because I want to get this knowledge out, and especially from a man where it might even be a little bit more stigmatized to express their truth and how they feel and their mental struggles. I love when you said, addiction and mental health almost one in the same. And, we can go into that a little bit later. I love, Gabor Mate's work, and how we share a lot of common wounds, and that there is something in our society that is, well, they seemed fine or they seemed okay, and that we have this ability to put on a mask that, we should just shove it down, we shouldn't be a burden. But I would say 95% of people that I work with that are struggling with mental health or addiction says the same thing. I thought I was the only one. I didn't want to burden anyone. I thought I could just suck it up and power through it. So I'm trying to fight the stigma of people reaching out, because we are in a place where if someone says, I need help, I have an addiction, I'm struggling with mental health, there's services, there are people, there's organizations, like you and everyone you're affiliated with, in this space. But I want to get people to get the courage and the vulnerability to actually start saying that. So where do we start? Where can people reach out? And I'm kind of like setting this up for maybe going to the sanctuary. You don't have to expose your deepest, darkest truths and the skeletons in your closet. So can people, start? Like, how do they start? Like, what's the first step that they take? How do they reach out? Is it going to an event? Is it, confiding in someone? Is it hiring a therapist? Is it all of the above? How do they figure out which is the right first step, so they're not at that point where it's a severe addiction or they want to take their life? Like, I'm trying to find a way that we
yeah.
can be preventative.
Well, I think the first step is education. I think like just like you said right now, like there's more and more people that are discovering the truth that yes, therapy and medications are great. They help, but there's no better medicine than community support. And as somebody who's been working in crisis treatment for like 9 years now, like I can tell you that the number one cause, and this is not just my anecdotal experience with my own clients, this is scientifically proven. This is what the World Health Organization is saying right now. The number one cause of depression, anxiety, and addiction, the big killers, is isolation and loneliness. It's either physically isolating from people or even when you're around people, feeling like you're just so disconnected from them. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to crisis treatment and be in group therapy every day but it does mean connecting with people. I was talking with, because of the work I do, I even like outside of the treatment world, I do get a lot of calls from people who have a family member who's struggling. And I'll tell you, I had a call with a guy last night, guy in his late 20s, and he told me his story and he felt like it was so unique. And I just wanted to, like, lost his job, like dropped out of school, was living alone in an apartment, and then he's wondering why he's so anxious. And I'm like, you're lacking purpose in your life. You're lacking community. You're saying you haven't worked in 2 years and that you've just been stuck in your parents' house. Of course you're feeling anxious. I didn't tell him, I mean, he already has a therapist. I didn't say, go continue to talk to your therapist once a week. You'll be fine. I said, why don't you come to the pasta party at my house this Sunday? The kid almost cried. Like, just no one's invited him to something. And he's not going to come over and we're not going to talk about our feelings. We're going to eat some pasta with 15 other people and we're going to play a fun game like Cards Against Humanity. Like, that is medicine too. So I believe, like, follow your intuition. I am, as a social worker, like, we are trained to be like the client or the person you're working with, they are the expert of their own story. I'm not the expert of anybody's story but my own. So, like, I'm not here to offer anybody suggestions or tell anybody what to do. I'm here to empower people to uplift themselves because everybody already has the tools they need. It's just showing people, hey, this is a tool already in your toolkit. Like, I'm just reminding you, maybe it's a good idea to use it. Like, we all have social skills. Some of them need to be honed and sharpened a little bit more because we're out of practice. But, like, giving people opportunities to come practice this tool that they already have, like connection. And with places like the sanctuary, we try to give multiple opportunities for that. So, for example, there's a concert tonight, 3 bands playing. That's a very like low bar for social connection. You could just come and witness other people who like that type of indie. I think it's indie rock tonight. Um, if you're looking for something a little bit deeper, we do have the women's circle. We do have pop-up breathwork and meditation classes. If you're looking for something that's like in between, we do have like the poetry circle where they just share their poetry and write on a prompt and meet with other poets. Like, and then you don't even have to share in those circles. You could just sit and listen. You could just listen to like other people share their poetry, just nod along and just be a part of the group. So we're trying to ever widen our doors to more opportunities for people to connect. I will say this. There's something a professor told me once, which I never forgot. We have unwritten social contracts as individuals, as just people. Like, you know, if I sneeze, you're going to say bless you, whether you believe in that or not, because it's just like, it's what we've deemed appropriate. One social contract that he pointed out to me was that we match each other's level of vulnerability. So if you are with a group of people that is being vulnerable, usually you will feel comfortable to match that. So a lot of people come to the sanctuary and are very hesitant, but if you're around people long enough and they're being vulnerable, you'll feel comfortable enough to do that. We try to push this. We have a connection form on our website where people can fill out the contact form and we will match one of our members who's close in age and personality with them. And so that we will be the first one to reach out and make a phone call and connect with them first. That when they show up to the sanctuary, they already know they're going to have a friend there, because it is so hard to be the first one to be vulnerable.
Yes. And I just want to clarify, Brian, before you hop in there, and kind of summarize to people that, when we say connection, we're not saying that you have to go and have like a heart to heart with people. You can go to a concert, just being around, and maybe you could dive into the research that you found as us being tribal and the importance of human connection in a little while. But I remember when I was isolating a bit and I wasn't in a great place mentally, and I would go to yoga, and my favorite thing would be when you'd have to look to the person next to you and say good morning, and then you turn again to the other person and you said good morning, and like that connection is so powerful. It's just a good morning, but it was like I got like a breath of fresh energy in that connected feeling. I didn't have to tell them what was going on in my life, but like I was seen, I was connected, I was really felt that I think that sense of again being seen, I think is the best way to describe it. So yeah, I think going to a concert, just showing up, you don't have to, you could just kind of give a wave. We're not asking everybody to, go to like a kumbaya and hold hands and say our deepest, darkest secrets, but just the power of being in the presence of other people. And I loved what you said about that we match each other's vulnerability. It is funny. I love the a lot of the 12-step programs and a lot of recoveries because there's just raw honesty, and that somebody tells you their story and you're like, well, mine doesn't seem that bad, I'm going to share now too. So if anything, you don't have to be an addict or codependent or whatever some of these 12-step
Yeah.
recovery programs are, but go to one of them. They're so welcoming and so warm, and like you just feel like, oh my god, I am human and everybody else is probably having a very similar experience. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. So real quick, Brian, before Brian goes and asks a question, when you were diving into the power of human connection and our tribal nature, can you briefly talk about how our current society of individualization and separation and isolation goes against that biological nature?
Yeah, I'll touch on it briefly. 'Cause I know I could be a talker. I
Oh,
love to
no,
talk,
no,
but
no,
in a
take as
nut,
long as you want.
in a nutshell, like if you look at the history of humans, we've mostly lived tribally. You know, those who wanted to natural selection, and those who didn't want to live tribally and wanted to live by, they died off. You know, so the people that stuck around were the people that were working together collaboratively. Like, and for most of human society, hunter gatherers, like we weren't faster than the animals we took down a lot of the time. We weren't stronger, but our superpower was that we band together and we worked together to get things done. Um, that's how we created the division of labor. You go collect the firewood, I'm going to go hunting. That person's going to build the shelter. We're all going to share the bounty at the end of the night. And so that we've evolved mentally to want to be involved in that. And if we are separated from the tribe, no wonder we're going to, like, if I separated from you from the tribe on the savannas of Africa and put you out in the middle of the grass, you're going to feel anxious. No one has your back. Like, it's just, this is a little bit of science, but also just intuition. Like, of course, that's an anxiety inducing state. If you're away from the tribe long enough and you have no one to connect with, you're going to feel depressed, you know? And so it's not that this is the only cause of depression and anxiety. There's actually 9 proven causes of depression and anxiety. And there's more than that, but there's 9 scientifically proven causes. But this is why we're starting to, like, the leading body in the world, the World Health Organization and other organizations are starting to see why, like, loneliness and lack of connection is the number one cause of depression, anxiety, and addiction. And there's just, there's so many movements around the world right now, like what they're doing in Portugal with addiction, what they're doing over in Europe with social prescribing, where like people, like societies are treating these big problems with connection as well as, traditional therapy medications, and they're having like incredible results. So it's no longer just like an idea, like this is a working theory.
That's amazing. Can you talk about how, even though the internet can connect people virtually more than ever from all over different places around the country and the world, it still can't replace the in-person connection? So I could find, say for instance, I'm trying to think of kind of a mediocre type of, band. So say there's like this band that I used to listen to in high school, right? And then I find this subreddit of all these fans that like them now, even though they haven't like released anything in like a decade. Um, liking posts on there and being like, wow, this is cool that a bunch of other people like this, is not the same as going to an indie event where you have people and you can feel the vibe and the energy and the sweat and the look on people's faces, and you kind of hear the musician within a couple dozen feet of you, and then you could talk to people about it afterwards. Can you talk about how the internet is a replacement that lacks a lot of the benefits of the in-person group connection that you're trying to
Yeah.
promote?
Well, the most up-to-date research on social media as it relates to how it affects our mental health, from my understanding, at least the last up to date like research I've read on it, because my own personal experience does count for something, but I also want to see like what's the mass, like what is the general experience. And they're saying that a small, for those that are in isolated rural areas, a small bit of social media is good to help connect them with society. But for that, the most part, what has been toxic for people when it comes to social media is that, and what's really bad for their mental health and makes us feel more isolated, is that I'm only seeing the highlight reels of Brian and Tara's life. I'm not seeing all the in between. You're just giving me what you want me to see, and then I'm comparing my entire whole life to just everybody's highlight reels, which sometimes aren't even true, you know? Um, how many of us know somebody who looks great on social media, but we know their intimate lives? So I don't think it's necessarily that social media is the problem. I think it's how we're using it. I mean, I'm really not going to give my opinion, nor do I have a solid one on like how I feel like we should limit children or even adults from social media. I will say though that it's a parody of human connection. You know, um, one of my favorite researchers, Johan Hari, and he has this funny saying. He summed it up like this. He basically said like you'll notice something like if you have a problem in your life, it won't be your Twitter followers that are going to come help you. It's not the people liking your Facebook posts that are going to help you turn it around. It's those like real flesh and blood relationships, those nuanced, textured, face-to-face relationships that are going to help you turn it around. So, yeah, that's great. If you have a social media presence, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I use social media, I love it, but I'm also like, you just have to be realistic about it. That if you're not also putting energy into your face-to-face connections, it's a problem. And again, for me, it goes back to intuition. Like, if I close my eyes and feel like, do I feel like I have a sense of community or do I feel like I'm alone? Like everybody can tell, like you can tell. And if your body and your mind and your soul is saying like, no, I need community, okay, then maybe let's take a few less hours of social media or utilize social media to get a gathering together. We can really use social media as a beautiful tool. I know you guys are. I know a few people that we both know are doing that. I know I get most of the people to come to the sanctuary because they were doom scrolling on Instagram and saw
No,
that we're hosting a concert.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, and this is kind of adjacent to it, but I had the thought
yeah.
that kept coming to my mind that if you think about all these old musicians and rockers that still are like the Springsteens and the Mick Jaggers that are still like on stage, like decades in. I mean, they don't need to be there, right? But there is an energy. This goes back to the first episode that we had about the energy of when you get tens of thousands of people in a spot. There is an energy there. There's an energy when you have 10 people in a room. They could do these concerts from a studio and live stream it. They could just count their Apple Music royalties that are coming in, but you can't replace that connection that they have with the crowd or with their bandmates, with their roadies, with everyone that they're going on the journey with. One thing that you had said was about social media and it being a parody. That's a great word for human connection because it's not real and it's kind of just the positive side of things. I think that we were talking about easing the person that's a little trepidatious in, but we should talk to the people that are already in. And this is a great opportunity in the new year to kind of invite somebody. If you've already taken that step and you've gone to a couple bonfires or game nights, you have an opportunity to reach out to somebody that may be struggling. Don't take no for an answer right away. We've all had this thing where maybe we've kind of convinced somebody that didn't want to go this, I don't want to really go out tonight. And then at the end of the night, they're like, oh, I'm so glad you asked me to do that. Or later, they'll drop you a note or a message like, oh, actually, that was really good for me. Thanks a lot. So think about maybe how you were a year or two ago and be the second level person where you're reaching out to somebody that
Mm,
is struggling. And that like can do wonders for you too, right? It's not just going to help them, but that kind of thing, like Tara was saying at the yoga class, when you're saying hi to the new person that's putting their mat down for the first time, that helps them out. But that also like makes you feel good too. So pay it forward. It's a great opportunity to do that as well.
I love what you just said because I mean, I do. When I talk to people at the sanctuary, that a lot of the times, or the work I do as a therapist, a lot of the times they're like, "Oh wow, you're so selfless." I'm like, no, like I very much like get a lot out of this, you know, like, very much like being of service to other people makes me feel like I have purpose in my life, releases those fun endorphins and all those fun chemicals that make me feel like valued in society. So like there is a give and take. Like there is an equal give and take, you know. When there's I'm, you know, everybody at the sanctuary is volunteer, including myself. But still, when an event's put together, like tonight, I'm going to go to the concert. I'm going to run the door at people are going to come in. Most people will just think, oh, he's just the door guy. And that's cool. I don't need you to know that I run the space. I don't need you to pay attention to me. But when the show's going on and everyone's having a good time, I can look and be like, wow, like if it wasn't for me, this wouldn't be happening right now. And the other people involved, you know, but like it's just it is I get something out of it too, you know.
Yeah,
That is something I really picked up from like the 12-step program too. And you know, they talk about how service is such a big part of not just recovery, but just like a happy life.
and that goes back to the whole tribal aspect, I think, is that interconnectedness of serving one another, you know, and
Yes,
without getting on my spiritual pedestal, we're all
do
one.
it.
We're all connected. So the other person is a version of you in some aspect. So I love that. Definitely. And we do have to redefine the word selfish and selfless. And I think in our culture and our society. But going to the back to the addiction, if you don't mind, talking to
Yeah.
that person that you mentioned the chemicals and the endorphins, and I love neurobiology and understanding the mechanics of what's going on. And you know, when people are in, and I say addiction loosely, it could be a habit, it could be addicted to their own, like being in a fight or flight, anxious situation. What about the person that say does have a bit of an addiction and they can't imagine ever feeling good naturally? Maybe they never did feel good naturally. Maybe they never felt good the that rush that you get from connection or love, or helping others. Can you speak to that? Did you ever have that feeling like I'm never going to naturally feel okay, and give like a little bit of hope, for lack of a better word, to somebody in isolation, mental struggles, or active addiction?
Yeah, I mean, what you're touching on is what a lot of people who struggle with addictions feel when they're like in the active part of their addiction. What I felt is just, yeah, how am I going to be able to, I think for those especially that are, you know, really high end on the addiction scale, it's not even like, can I be happy without drugs and alcohol? It's can I function,
Mm,
period, without drugs and
yeah,
alcohol?
yeah.
You know, can I even survive without it? Much less like have fun. And you know, again, going back to Johan Hari, my favorite researcher, he has a whole TED talk and a book out on addiction. You know, he says maybe instead of calling it addiction, especially since that word's become so stigmatized, can we refer to addiction as bonding? Like how human beings have this like innate need to bond with to bond. And when we're bonding with others, when we're bonding with healthy work that we love, when we have healthy connections and bonds with the outside world that we want to be present for, then we have no need to escape through drugs and alcohol. But if you can't do that because you're isolated or you're traumatized or you've been beaten down by the world, you're going to find something to bond with. Now, that might be cocaine and heroin, that might be your technology and social media, that might be gambling, whatever it is, wherever you are on the addiction scale, which a lot of people are on the addiction scale, you know, and we put them in categories, but it doesn't really matter. It just comes down to like, yeah, I think and you know, I mean, I don't want to go off on a whole rabbit hole down the rabbit hole here of addiction too much, but I really do think like our society has a very misunderstanding of what addiction is and how to treat it. But instead of just talking about taking away the substance or the behavior that someone's addicted to, I think we much more need to talk about, okay, well, once that substance or behavior is taken away or removed with their obviously consent to do so, what's the new solution? What was missing? What needs of there were not met that they were filling with drugs and alcohol? A lot of the time that is, you know, feeling disconnected. And addiction is a nasty cycle in which a lot of people start using in part because they feel disconnected from others, and then the addiction physically makes them more retract from society. So I mean, if you want to look more into the Portugal model, they decriminalized all drugs 20 years ago and offered, you know, free treatment for addicts and free programs for addicts to get jobs and set up small businesses to reconnect with society. And after like 15 years, their injecting drug use was down by 50%, 50. Like they're doing it right, you know?
Yeah.
Not to go too down the rabbit hole here, but there is,
No,
I know, back to your original question, yes, there is a lot of hope. I know a ton of people. My suggestion to anybody who's struggling is to get connected with people who have overcome their addictions, whether that's in 12-step groups or not, and just like let them love you through the process. Stop trying to do this by yourself. That's the first step. I think is just find other people who have had the same addiction that you have gone through it, and let them love you through it.
yeah.
And that's the hope. Because just
Yeah.
reading out of a book or a TED talk isn't going to do it. Like if you're truly struggling with an addiction, you need that daily reminder from somebody over the phone or in person. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you are spot on with educating people on what addiction is. And, again, I know I mentioned Gabor Mate before, but I come to the understanding that almost
Yeah, he's great.
all addiction, if not all, is based on some sort of a trauma, right? There might be this misconception still that it's people that were indulgent and they just got out of hand. And it's like, no, a happy, safe, person that has been, cared for and loved, biologically safe, is not going to probably become an addict, right? So I think we need
Very
to
true.
start talking about why people are addicts. It's not because they just want to have a lot of fun. They're medicating themselves, and a lot of times it is because the lack of social connection, right? Their physiology, their nervous system has not been built or doesn't have the foundation for connection. Connection wasn't safe or isn't safe, and they reach out for something. It's natural to want to feel okay to survive. So, and also thank you for clarifying that. Like, and I mentioned like, oh, what about people that are afraid they can never be happy? What about people that are afraid that they're not going to make it through the day if they don't have a certain external thing to grasp onto that's usually harmful even further to their system. So that is amazing. Thank you so much for your insight on that, Brian.
Yeah. Is it possible to be a musician and be on the road and be straight edge?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I will just say like I'm not against the term straight edge or what that group stands for. I don't consider myself straight edge because I think that's more of a philosophy that also involves, you know, certain other behaviors than just substance free.
Right. Okay.
I also personally don't like how straight edge like are sort of judgmental towards people that use
Yeah. All right.
substances.
So maybe I can
Yeah, I hear you
reframe
though,
and use
but
a
no,
newer
yeah,
term like not
I hear you.
use drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, I did it. I did it. I remember this isn't recommended, but after like 30 days being out of my last rehab in 2016, I was still an active touring musician, and they were like, "It's time to get on the road." And I was with people who actively were using,
So that
and
was a test right there.
it was, but recovery is not about willpower and strength and white knuckling it and I'm not going to do it. It's about putting in the preventative maintenance. So, I was out there finding meetings, and going to them early in the morning before the van took off to the next city. I had a sponsor I was calling, and we were reading out of, different spiritual texts together and learning. He was teaching me how to live my life, like it is possible to do it, but I will say, like, for me, it was not sustainable. And I know a lot of touring musicians feel this way because when you are touring so much, it is hard to form a stable community around yourself, but it's not impossible. And obviously, like, there's tons of famous musicians who have long been sober for decades.
Mm,
So if you want it, you can do it. Like, for example, my schedule is really busy. I go to Zoom meetings at 10 o'clock every night, and I have a community of people online there that I've never even met in person, but we are connected. So if you want it, you'll get it,
right.
no matter what you're doing. Um, just
Yeah,
for
but there's
me
also
with the
like it is kind of crazy the dichotomy of being somebody that's on that path of recovery and then being surrounded by others that aren't. I mean, if you watch like any behind the music or any story of a band, there's always going to be some kind of clash of, people trying to get clean and then, others that don't want to. And I don't know, but they're sometimes on another level. And they also have maybe like a security of like income that kind of makes their challenges maybe a bit different than the average person, which is kind of interesting. But that kind of lifestyle, it I would imagine makes it challenging because it lends itself to like an isolation, like you said, and maybe you're away from your tribe that's more grounded for a lot of time during the year, and then that is really like how you said it's not a matter oftentimes, and in your case personally, of willpower and white knuckling it, but preventative actions, and that's pretty awesome. And that could probably be said for dieting and a lot of things, right? Because if you plan ahead, and we're 2025, new year, people are trying to form a lot of habits and do a lot of things. And can you kind of speak a little bit to that, how power and white knuckling are not going to take you to 30, 60, 90 days? And what are some of the other secrets that Matthew espouses?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's just my philosophy. I think it's just a bold-faced lie. People say that being in recovery from substance use is a matter of willpower. I think it's very stigmatizing too, saying that somebody who has an addiction issue, that they somehow have a moral failing, that they weren't able to stop when other people were able to. I mean, I can't tell you how many people hear that I'm in recovery and they're like, "Oh, my parent was an addict, but I just knew when to stop. So like, thankfully I didn't become an addict." And I'm like, I just nod my head because I'm like, all right, like that's not true, but okay. You know, it doesn't come down to willpower. There's many people who have addictions who in various other parts of their life have extreme success and are able to utilize their own strength and willpower. When it comes to addiction, it's just not the case. And so, you just used a great example there. If I'm dieting and I don't meal prep and I know I'm going to be out of the house for 10 hours that day, and I just made like a little 8-ounce protein smoothie, and I'm a 230-pound man, when after I drink this is happening to me now because I'm trying to lose a little bit of weight. I'll drink that little smoothie, and then if I didn't plan ahead and I'm hungry, if I wait till the hunger to try to meal
Right,
prep,
right.
I'm in trouble because I'm hungry. If I meal prepped and I had my grilled chicken over greens, in the fridge ready to go for my second meal of the day, I'm good. It's the same way with recovery. Like you can't just rely on the work you did yesterday to always carry you through the next day. And I say for everyone, just find your non-negotiables. Like what's worked for you in the past, what hasn't, what needs to change. That's what I work on with my clients. What's your non-negotiables? I know I have 7, and yeah, my big thing is like, yeah, preventative maintenance. If you're waiting until you want to use a substance, a lot of the times it's too late. I hate to say it that way, but a lot of times it's too late.
Can you say that
If you
again?
like 12, if you're waiting until you want to get high or use your addictive behavior, sometimes it's too late. Sometimes the craving gets the best of you. But if you're doing preventative maintenance, if you're like, oh, hey, I like going to meetings, I'm going to push myself to go to X amount of meetings a week, no matter what, whether I'm doing good or bad. I'm going to push myself to make 5 phone calls a week to people just to have conversations,
Sure.
I'm going to read my spiritual literature. I'm going to go to a certain amount of yoga classes a week. Whatever it is, whatever works for you. Like, you can't wait until shit hits the fan,
Right.
you know?
That's huge. And that made me think of a question I wanted to ask you about intuition. How did you learn to trust your intuition after your recovery? And how do you know the difference between like a nagging voice in your head and a all pervasive feeling in your essence? And as a man too, like women are said to have an more intuitive nature. but I think I know we all have intuition. How do you delineate it from fear, and your ego, or the wounded part of yourself, and actual intuition of mind, body, spirit?
I've never been asked that question. That's a really, really great question. One thing, hmm, there's a dichotomy in addiction, or a paradox. I'm not sure which word here. I think a paradox, where they tell you, like, don't trust yourself. You are the one who caused the problem, so you can't fix it. So let us help you fix it. Don't trust yourself. You're powerless. And on the other side, they're saying, but there is so much power in the group and having a higher power. So it's kind of like, what do you mean here? Um, I I will say, it goes back to the serenity prayer for me, whether you believe in a higher power or not. Like, what do I need to just accept that I am powerless over, and then I need help with, and maybe and what areas can I courageously change on my own? Well, to get back to your question, I've had to relearn to trust parts of my intuition, but have a healthy skepticism of my own thoughts. Um, so, like, for example, there are areas where I do use intuition a lot. As you know, Tara, as you know, I've gotten really into breath work this year, and I do a lot of intuitive breath work. I've learned so many breath work patterns that sometimes I'll just spend an hour, put some music on, and just intuitively breathe, and like let whatever comes up come up. But then if I'm talking, like, if I feel like quitting my job or something, that's something I'm going to run by a few close people. Hey, what do you think about this? You know what I mean? Um, yeah, on bigger decisions, I'm going to run thoughts by other people. But at the same time, I I do have power. I you know I and I yeah. This is a question I've never been asked for, so this is a really good one. I want to contemplate
It's
a little bit more. But yeah, it's a paradox. There's a few paradoxes within the 12-step program, and that's one of them. Is yes, I am powerless over my addiction, and I need powers greater than myself, including higher powers, my friends, my support group, maybe medications to help me. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I'm powerless in all areas of my life, and
Can,
I can trust my intuition at points. Yeah,
Yeah,
does that help?
I
awesome. Can,
it's really what it comes down
Yeah.
to. So thank you for sharing that.
For sure. Back to the program and to recovery, successful kind of, options for recovery and things that you've seen work. Can you talk about one of the things that I see is, a common thread is honesty, basically, for even those that don't really know about, 12-step program and things like that. You get up there in front of people and you're encouraged to share, and it is a safe space and to listen. Can you talk about in the journey to recovery and to making connections with people and allowing them to help you, the importance of being honest?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of what we call spiritual principles in the 12-step program. I just want to, like, slowly back up for 1 second, though. I'm going to answer this question and just say, for anybody who's listening, if the 12-step program isn't your thing, there are a lot of opportunities in other support groups to practice a lot of these same spiritual principles, or lack thereof. There's smart recovery that doesn't focus anything on spirituality. And even the 12-step programs admit that they don't have a monopoly on recovery. But to speak on honesty in the context of the 12-step program, um, yeah, well, I've found two things. There's a great, he calls it a pathway to a higher consciousness. This guy, Ken Keyes, he has 12 pathways to a higher consciousness. And one of them goes this, it's number 7, I think. I open myself genuinely to all people, for hiding in any degree feeds my illusion of separateness from others. I open myself genuinely to all people, for hiding in any degree feeds my illusion of separateness from others. A lot of those that struggle with addiction issues, and just regular people, have this feeling that they are different from other people, that they are, most of the time, that they feel worse than other people. And that just feeds that, okay, well, if I'm a piece of crap, I might as well just use. So with the addiction piece, if we can shatter that illusion by sharing openly about all the good, the bad, the ugly, it makes us feel more connected. And the more connected we feel, the less we want to escape drugs and alcohol. So that honesty piece is huge. The second part, and I'll go over it briefly, one of my favorite studies they've done on vulnerability this is a peer-reviewed study. They've done it over and over again. It's always the same result. Is they'll take a control group and an experimental group, and they'll have them journal and then share with each other, share in the group, and then document their mood. And they'll give like the control group just very blanket, easy, like what did you have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner prompts, surface level stuff. Share with the group and then document their mood, and then they'll have groups that really do vulnerable prompts. What's the most pain you've ever felt that wasn't physical? What are you most afraid of? Things like that. Have them share and document their mood. And a lot of the times, every time they've done this experiment, the experimental group that's getting vulnerable, their mood tanks for like a week or two, and then slowly starts to go up and slowly go up and then surpasses the control group. And then by the end of like a few months, however long the experiment is, their mood's always a lot better. I just very nutshelled that experiment. But in a sense, what it says to me as a person in recovery and anybody who listens is like, it's very much going to feel painful to start being honest and opening up. The fourth and fifth step in recovery, for example, about sharing the inventory of your whole life, everything you feel guilty about doing, everybody who's harmed you that you've held on to. Like, these are things that, like, you might feel some relief after, but it might get uglier before it gets better. But like, the human experience is that, like, the more of the trash that you let out as you let the compressor off and let some of it out, eventually it benefits your mental health. It benefits your mood to have other people hear you and not run away. you know and I'll tell
Yeah.
you, as a therapist and a sponsor, I've heard everything under the book, everything in the book, everything under the sun. Yeah.
Absolutely, and we were just talking about this yesterday with a guest that had done an 8-hour meditation, and there was, he talked about basically an emotional hangover, right? So if you think of our body as uh, the container for holding all of our unprocessed emotions and feelings and experiences, well, we have to let them out. Like the pressure cooker, like, has to start releasing and letting it out, and it might feel uncomfortable. And in our instant gratification culture, it's like, well, that didn't help. I don't feel any better. It's like, well, no, like, you spent a couple decades shoving stuff down. It's going to take a little while to let that release. So that's such a great experiment. I love that you're so science based and you have you have the spirituals part and the science part, because that a lot of people helps, if they can hear it in a way that they've done an experiment and they've had this proven, that will help people get on board, whatever it takes, to get people to
Yeah.
admit.
I know, like, for me at least, like, there were some practices that were a little too woo-wooey for me, that then I tried them later in life and I was like, why didn't I try this before? And so I try to very much like invite, use like very plain speak, practical things to invite my clients and people that come to any of my events into things like this. For example, breath work was something I knew about for years, but I thought it was a little just too out there. I thought it was just people getting high off of oxygen and stuff. And then I tried it and I was like, this is a spiritual liberating experience, but I want to sell it to those who are trying it and give them some, like, I've done my research, and not my own research, but I've looked up a lot of studies they've done on meditative breathing, on faster paced breathing, and how it benefits your mental health. And I'm like, hey, this is scientifically proven that this could really help you. And it does help those who are a little bit more ambivalent about like holistic practices.
What
Yeah,
do you
can you
say to go ahead, Tara.
I was just gonna say, can you talk I know you facilitate some breath work. I know we have a mutual friend, Dean Cramp, that does breath work. Can you talk a little bit about what happens in a breathwork session when you do these group ones? I know Brian and I have been getting into breathwork more. And for you could talk about maybe like what physiologically how it's helping, and spiritually and mentally, whatever that.
Yeah,
Describe however you'd like.
I mean, in a nutshell, like, I am still learning in this area. I think like it's been about a year that I've been even just doing breath work on my own, but I've sort of dived in head first, trying to learn more about it. The problem is there's not a ton of research into it. I My thought behind that is like big pharma is going to research whatever they can make money off of. They can't really make a lot of money off of telling people to breathe because it's free. So there's not a ton of research into it. The research that is done into it though is mostly on slower paced meditative breathing, which shows that it is having just as a profound effect on people's mental health as like cognitive behavioral therapy, which has tons of research done into it. Like they will A and B cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like one of the most widely used therapy techniques, and meditative breath work, and they're getting the same results. Um, so I can use that to help clients understand a little bit more. But I'm going to be honest, a lot of what I'm doing with clients now is a little bit more anecdotal, non-scientific. Like, hey, this is what I've seen work with a lot of people. If it's not in a therapeutic relationship, if it's just at the sanctuary, I could share my own experience and be like, this is my experience with it. And I feel like it's more of a spiritual practice than a therapeutic practice because I am not telling anybody what to do other than a breath pattern and then monitoring them and trying, if, I'm learning energy work, but for the most part, I'm just facilitating an environment where they can be extremely vulnerable. So I'm creating that container for them. I'm guiding them through the breath work and I'm giving them kind of what to expect physically and emotionally, and then they guide it themselves. So I kind of try to just explain that to them. I try to explain to the best of them, like all the physical things they might experience during it, that there might be a point where they come across like, a fork in the road where they could just relax, take an easy meditation, or if something does come up uncomfortable to follow that. Um, I'm still learning the science behind it, to be honest. I think, at least for what's happening to me, I think it's because I am hyper oxygenating. Did I say that word right? My blood. Um, that it's enabling me to think more clearly, and that the breathwork pattern is bringing up all that stuck energy from past traumas, from past things I haven't gotten over. And so yeah, I'm tripping over my words here, but
Are
essentially,
you seeing, so
yeah.
anecdotally, are you seeing a lot when you post conference or discuss with clients? Are you seeing a lot of anxiety? Are you seeing a lot of clarity? Are you seeing a lot of more centered? Are you hearing that people you hearing? I feel like I got more energy. What are some of the most common responses that you're seeing and hearing from people?
Yeah, so there's as you both know, many different types of breath work. I know, Tara Dean, he does a lot of the transformational breath work, like huge ceremonies where we release a lot. A lot of the breath work I'm doing with my clients is to calm them down. So a lot of the times after, like, I have a little mini setup where they put on headphones. I put on headphones, then I guide them through a microphone with music and aromatherapy, and they're, laying down. So I get a lot afterwards that they feel incredibly calmer afterwards. So that's mainly what I'm doing. A lot of times when there's a client who wants to leave treatment because they're upset, or they just, I have one of my clients right now that DCP&P is trying to take away her kid, and the father of her kid's trying to get custody. She's losing it. But obviously it's a 3-year-old kid, but she wants to stay in treatment and get better. So we use calming breath work to get her to stay present and calm her mind down. And there's so many different techniques. I'm really into like Peter Levine right now, and in like somatic healing, and he talks all about using breath, movement, music, mantra to really
Mhm.
stir and just get all these stuff out. So I'm using a lot of different techniques that, to be quite honest, aren't super like scientifically studied, but like I know that they work and they've been used for thousands of years you
Yeah,
know
absolutely. I love Peter Levine, and the somatic experiencing. I, would also argue that a lot of these people, like, yes, therapy and talking things out can be helpful on a one-on-one setting, but a lot of people that don't need, they're very introspective. A lot of addicts, a lot of people with suffering with mental health, like they know what's going on. They can be very aware. So getting them to breathe, to them doing breath work gets them out of their head and
Mhm.
allows them to be in their body. And then when you're in your body, I think you can begin to release, right? So they know now that our experiences are stored in our physical body, our energetic bodies. So yeah, that's amazing. And I think you touched on a really important point. There's so many different types of breath work. So like, I tell people same thing with yoga. It's like you don't just go to one class and say you don't care for it. Try a lot of different ways. Same thing with breath work. Take several different classes or experiment with it on your own. Do some YouTubes, and you'll find what works. Some people need energy. Some people need to be calmed down, or even throughout the matter of a week or a day, someone might be heightened, might need to come down. Somebody might be down, they might need to come up. So it's really like learning the flow of their nervous system, which is really what I think is so instrumental in the results of breath work.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, like I do for me, like 4-7-8 works a lot. Just breathe in for 4, hold for 7, release for 8. Sometimes adding a mantra to it, and I do that daily. I've probably done 4-7-8 like twice since we've been on this call. Like I just
I love
because
that.
I could do it. I could do it while still paying attention and
You're
like
like,
with
oh,
my
that's
eyes
great.
open. Yeah,
Yeah,
And without anyone noticing, because I
yeah,
didn't notice.
that's amazing.
yeah,
I like to
You do it on a subway in front of a million people. If you're
and
shy, no one will notice.
someone cuts you off. Yes, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, we'll have to do like a workshop. So we'll teach some people how to some breathwork techniques. I think
yeah. I
our
mean,
listeners would love
my
that.
teacher Dean. He's the expert. I'm still
Yeah.
learning from him, but
Yeah, we
yeah,
could definitely do some breath work and tell people like some of these things are really accessible. That's the other thing. It's breath. It's free. You can do it anywhere. You can do it for free. Um, so just switching over to a question I like to ask everyone, can you recommend to our listeners and to us and share a book that has been really instrumental in maybe even life changing? It could be more than one. Well, what comes to mind when I say like a book that really made you shift your reality, your perception?
yeah. I guess one book I've touched a little bit on it is it's called Lost Connections by Johan Hari. It it was it's a he's a researcher who goes all around the world researching different topics, and he did a whole book on depression and anxiety. He breaks down the 9 proven causes of depression and anxiety and their solutions.
Okay.
And I thought it was very awesome because 7 of the causes are factors in the way we're living our life. They have nothing to do with our genetics or biology. The other
Okay.
2 are genes and biology. So it was very eye opening, and I literally have it on the wall in my office for my clients to read. I'm like, which one of these do you identify with? Oh, you identify with these 3? That's what we're going to be working on while you're here, you know?
That's great.
So yeah, and it's an audiobook too that he reads himself. Yeah, very, very easy read, very digestible. I do love, like the Peter Levine, Gabor Mate, those type of books, but they can be a little dense. They can be very science heavy.
Sure.
This was an easy read. He collaborated with Gabor Mate and a lot of other people in the field to write this book, so I think it's a very, very good read.
Awesome. And then one thing that I had wanted to ask as we head to the end, just so much stuff here. It could go on forever. You got a wealth of info
Oh,
and really
thank you.
appreciative. You had talked at the very beginning about that decade, that really long period of time in your life where you were struggling, isolated, thinking in your own head that you were alone. You had battle with addiction and a lot of things going on. What is one thing now you're on the journey, but I think everyone listening and viewing it would say that you're really centered and you're ascending more than a lot of people that have struggled. What's one thing Matthew Smith 2024 would tell that young man struggling back then, maybe that could have helped him to shrink the period of time where he had to go through those challenges?
I like, in one of the 12-step books, they break down. I like when recovery is broken down very simply. I like simple things. And in one of the recovery books, it says the only thing required for recovery is a fellowship and a psychic change. And I think they meant that in order. Fellowship meaning a community of people that are loving and supporting, and that then you'll get that change in mindset, psychic change, spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it, through different avenues, whether that's you want to go the 12-step route, whether that's you want to go, the holistic route, whatever route you want to go, scientific route, a religious route.
Yoga.
Yeah, all of it. But I think the biggest thing is like the old saying, if you hang out at a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. Besides you and me, Brian, we're bald. But if you hang out with people who are actively in recovery and trying to better themselves, and give them the opportunity to love you, and you're being vulnerable with them and saying, I need your help, like, you're going to recover faster.
Yeah. Like the
Yeah.
saying, you're the 5 people that you surround yourself with, the
Yeah.
most, is there's truth to it. If we're all energy, then that has to be true.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. And so even for
Excellent.
people that aren't in recovery, that's why, myself and the 7 other people created the sanctuary,
Yeah.
because we want other people to be able to find their people that aren't just struggling with addictions.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I
Yes.
really, love that. The community building, that could be something that I would like to touch on more. You mentioned it a couple times, how it's not just, the people that are really struggling that need this. It's just,
Ever.
the Gen Pop does, like, society writ large. So it's, keep doing what you're doing. We've had the pleasure of speaking with Matthew Smith over this past hour. He's been very gracious with his time. Matt, where can people find you and connect with you and the sanctuary online, and what will they expect when they do find you?
Yeah, I mean, our website is thesanctuarynj.com. If you go on there, you'll learn everything about us. Our calendar's on there, different ways to contact us, different ways to connect. Our Instagram's the same, the Sanctuary NJ. Those are the main 2 things we use right now. Is we're still a growing organization. Is Instagram and that website. We have a Facebook as well that our Instagram just automatically posts to. Um, yeah. If you want, on our website, you can sign up for our newsletter. If you prefer that, we just send out like 1 email a month, just usually a little blog, and then our calendar for the month. Yeah.
And there's a link that people can donate, and
Yeah, there is a link. You can make a one-time donation, or we do offer optional memberships for those that would like to subscribe for a reoccurring membership that comes with, different various levels of benefits. All donations and subscriptions are tax deductible as well, since we are a 501c3 nonprofit. So you can write them off on your taxes. Yay.
Yeah, wonderful.
Awesome. Who doesn't like that?
Thank you so
Yep.
much. You. I can't
Thank you
wait.
so much, Matthew. It was a pleasure meeting you. Keep in touch.
Will do, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. We appreciate you being part of this community. For more resources, insights, and ways to connect, head over to youroneself.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Overcast. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, keep aligning your mind, body, and spirit, and peace, love, and self-discovery.